everybody. Welcome to another edition of K&E Theater Group's Local Spotlight Series. Thank you for sharing your evening with us. We're super excited about today's interview. Before we start though, just a couple of things. If you are so inclined to help K&E Theater Group out with their 2021 season by donating, in the comment section here on Facebook, there is a link for a PayPal. If you click on that, you can donate there. If you're watching on IGTV or our YouTube channel, or you're on Facebook and just say, hey, I want to donate later, you can always go to our website, which is ketg.org, click on Support KETG, and donate there. I'm really excited about today's interview. It's a good friend of mine. He's a yoga teacher, he is a writer, he is an actor. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Lindel Hart.
Hi, Eddie.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is always fun to talk to you.
And it's Zoom. It's the
wave
of the future.
It's the wave of the now too.
It's the wave of the now. All right, we are going to start with the same question I ask everybody, kind of like to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
So talk to us about your theatrical timeline. How you got into performing and theater, where you are now, and all the fun stuff in between.
Okay. All right. So let's see. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, and there wasn't a lot of theater going on there at the time because it was, the 70s and not a lot. So performing experience that I got was largely through school and church sometimes, and some community theater. The first actual play that I did was when I was I think a sophomore in high school, and I did a musical called Leave It to Jane, and it's an old P.G. Wodehouse chestnut from like 1920 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And it was a blast, and that's what really, I think, turned me on to theater and got me started in this. And then there were other school plays and community theater plays, and then I went to college and majored in music at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and I ended up staying in Pittsburgh for like 11 years. Yeah, so after the college years, I did a lot of experimental theater and some community theater and performance art. And I would say that in the Pittsburgh years, there were a couple of highlights. One of them, and they're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. So on the kind of low end of the spectrum, technically, we did something called Godzilla the Musical.
Okay.
A totally unlicensed, unauthorized, illegal version of Godzilla. And there were times there were more people on stage than in the audience, and there were only 7 cast members. So those were some strange days. And there are just a million stories about how weird that whole experience was, but I won't go into all of that right now. But suffice it to say, that was one of the more bizarre theater pieces I did in like 1985. And then I also did something called The Angels of Swedenborg, which is a performance piece by a New York performance artist named Ping Chong. And he came to Pittsburgh and hired a bunch of local performers to do this really beautiful, ethereal piece that's kind of a meditation on some of the religious and philosophical writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, who was, there are Swedenborg churches in the country, not that many, but it was this whole kind of odd little sect that grew up at one point, and I don't know why he picked that, but he did this really beautiful ethereal play with a lot of movement, and so I did that, and that was a fun 80s kind of thing. And then I moved to New York in '93 and had pretty much decided that I was not performing anymore, that I was going to do just writing. And I, within months, ended up in this show called Bitch Dyke Fag Hag Whore, which, which
Quite a
was,
title.
yeah, I know, it's a great title. The New York Times would never print it. They never printed the show title. They always called it the Penny Arcade Sex and Censorship Show, which was kind of like the subtitle of the this performance piece. But it was a really powerful piece of political theater by a downtown performance artist named Penny Arcade. And essentially, it was a one-woman show with go-go dancers. And clearly, she was the one woman, and I was one of the go-go dancers. And that show ran for over a year in New York at the Village Gate. It started off, I think, at PS 122 and then moved to the Village Gate. And when we closed at the Village Gate, we took the show to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe and did a whole bunch of sold out performances there, and then continued to tour. I toured for the next year or two off and on with her to London, to Ireland, to the Vienna Festival. I can't remember where else we went, but she has taken it all over the world. And the last time I was aware of it, she was performing it in London for like a 3-month run or something a couple of years ago.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure the material had changed, but it was all about sex and censorship, the politics of sex and sexuality. And it was a really powerful, beautiful piece of theater. And I loved doing it. And it was always kind of raw and on the edge. And so that was a big highlight. And after that, I didn't do a whole lot. I kind of retired from performing until about, I don't know, 2011, something like that. And I kind of got sucked back into it. And that was here in the Valley, and did a bunch of musicals with Jaduke, did Rocky Horror.
Jaduke is up in Turner's Falls, correct?
Turner's Falls, right, yeah. Did obviously Rocky Horror with you in, I think that was 2012.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was, I think, the oldest Brad ever cast.
But you look like you're like 12.
Well, and have in the last, 9-10 years here in the Valley done kind of a lot of interesting stuff. Everything from immersive theater with John Bechtold from Amherst High School to, community theater at Jaduke, and more experimental pieces. And I wrote and performed in a new adaptation of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's novel. And now I'm working on the book of a new musical called Savage. So it's kind of been all over the place, but it's been a lot of fun, and it keeps me interested and on my toes, and,
that's amazing.
Active in the theater here. So.
Well, it's like you're keeping yourself creative, but in many different facets.
Right, right.
So it doesn't get stale. It doesn't get old. There's always something to go to. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, I balance that with like my other life, my work life as a yoga teacher. So, and I think the two actually work together really well. They inform each other and support each other. So it's kind of a nice balance.
Can you tell us about your yoga
Sure.
classes and stuff? Yeah.
I used to have a studio in Shelburne Falls, and right now I am focusing most of my teaching time at Deerfield Academy. I'm the yoga teacher there, and I teach students and I teach adults, and I work with some of the athletic teams. And it's a lot of fun. I love that. And I also teach a couple of classes at Community Yoga here in Greenfield. And so I get a kind of mix of students, for everything from, I have one woman who brings her like 8 or 9 year old son to class, and then I have a lot of women past 70 that come to one of my classes. So it's and everything in between.
Now,
So
say like I'm assuming you're doing some yoga over Zoom.
I am, yeah.
Pandemic. Um, is there a way for anyone watching to be able to participate in one of those Zoom yoga classes? And
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah. So if you were to go to community-yoga.com, that is the studio in Greenfield that I teach out of. And when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, we decided, like so many other places, to offer classes via Zoom. And for being an imperfect venue for yoga, it's actually been kind of fun because I've been able to work with people not just locally, but I have someone in Portland, Oregon, and someone in San Francisco who regularly tune into my classes. So it's like you just never know who you're going to get, and that's kind of the fun of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we talked about your theatrical timeline.
Yep.
What is your favorite performance and why?
Oh, my favorite performance that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think because I lived with it for so long, I'd have to say Frankenstein. It's an interesting piece because I played the creature, and the stipulation, I was commissioned to write this new piece by Linda McInerney at Egg Tooth Productions, and she said, I will happily produce and direct this if you write it, but there's one stipulation, and that is you have to be in it and perform it as the creature. And I was like, okay, is that a compliment? And it was. I mean, she like other people who know the work of Mary Shelley, recognize that it's a far cry from what Hollywood has done to Frankenstein's creature. And he's an incredibly sensitive, incredibly intelligent, just innately, I like to think of him as an innately spiritual character who then gets just beaten down by everyone, literally and figuratively, until he just can't take it anymore and lashes out, and that's when he becomes murderous and vengeful, and the whole story turns. But there is a beauty in his sensitivity and his intelligence, and so to be able to explore that as a writer and also then as a performer was a real gift. And of course, the other piece of that is, in order to be the creature, you have to be made to look like someone stitched you together from body parts, and it's a very specific look. And so part of that concept early on was that we were going to need someone to do a really bang up makeup job, because it becomes essentially another character. The makeup and the look of the creature becomes a character in and of itself. And so Linda was able to get Joe Delude, who is a phenomenal makeup artist and performer and writer, who has like literally something like 20, I don't even know how many, 15, 20 Broadway credits, including Wicked and SpongeBob and Beetlejuice and just all these amazing shows. And so he designed and implemented the makeup that I wore in Frankenstein, and it took like an hour and a half to put it on. And it was head to toe. I shaved my head. The only thing that never got made up was the soles of my feet. Wow. So use your imagination in between. It was quite a process, but it was so much fun to work with him, to work with Linda on this piece. And we we were able to create the piece kind of site specifically for the First National Bank and Trust building in Greenfield, which is this amazing 1920s piece of architecture. It's an abandoned bank.
Oh, wow.
And it had been kind of gutted, but there were remnants of what were like a kiosk in the center of the space that had been where people wrote checks and deposits and things, and the safe deposit cage with the iron bar. I mean, it's beautiful and horrible, and it was the perfect place to do Frankenstein. And we had bats flying around during performances, squirrels, and so it was very atmospheric, and with these great projections that wrapped around 3 walls. It was pretty fierce. So we did that, and I lived with it for so long because not only the period of writing it, but then performing it, and then we did a couple of other local performances at Springfield museums, and then took it to Edinburgh to the Fringe and did 15 shows there.
Oh, wow.
And then ended up doing a final performance at the Academy of Music. And, so it ranged from all of these different theatrical venues. And every time we did it, we had to adapt everything about it so that it fit in the space and made sense. So I think that'd be my favorite. Close second would be doing Lungs with Stephanie Carlson, who is just a phenomenal actress here in the Valley. And it's a 2-person piece, like a 90-minute show, and both characters are on stage all the time, talking nonstop. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to memorize, but it was so gratifying. So those are definitely high points. And then Bitch Like Fag Hag Whore was just fun. So
That's just fun. Yeah.
and to be able to say it over and over again.
So we've established that you write.
Yeah.
Not only do you write plays like Frankenstein, but you write the book of a musical like Savage.
Right.
How do you choose your subject matter? And how do you go from choosing that subject matter to a finished product?
Right. That's a great question. And it's got a lot of different kind of tendrils in it, I think. I'll address choosing a project first. I often say that a project chooses me because it'll just start getting in under my skin, and I keep thinking about it until I feel like, okay, I have to do something with this. That's one way that I approach things. And another is that sometimes projects come to me via other people. Frankenstein was like that. Linda and I wanted to work on something together, and we didn't know what. And we searched for 9 months.
Oh, wow.
Before, just trying to come up with something that we wanted to do. And she went on vacation, and when she got back, she called me up and she said, I have the perfect piece for us to work on. And I said, okay, great. What is it? And she said, Frankenstein. She said, I just read this great script that was done at the National Theatre in London, and I think it'd be a good vehicle. And I want you to play the creature. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll read it. So I bought it from Amazon, and I read the script. And I was like, yeah, that's good. That'd be fun to work on. And in the meantime, she said, okay, well, I'm going to write and try to get the rights to perform it here. And they wouldn't call her back. And finally, she got a letter from them saying, we are declining your request. And I think it was because they were about to release the National Theatre live version to theaters in the United States, to movie theaters. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't letting anyone do it. And so I went to see it at one point. I think I was already done with writing our version of it. And I was like, okay, well, they did one thing and we did something really different. And once she told me that we couldn't do it, I said, well, it is in the public domain, so we could do our own version. And she said, okay, if you write it, we're in, let's do it. And I said, okay. So that was how that one came about. And then it just, percolated. And I did a lot of reading and research. I reread the novel. I read a lot of scholarly material about Frankenstein. I looked at articles all over the place about the story and about the kind of social pieces around that and how it affects society and what has happened to society as a result of Frankenstein and science fiction growing up out of that and all that stuff. But so my way of working sometimes, and I joke about this with Linda because everything I've ever worked on with her, I've done this, but I have a stack of index cards, and when I'm trying to put something together, I'll write out like the key elements of a scene or the key elements of a character or even bits of dialogue, and I'll put it out on the floor, and it's just like a jigsaw puzzle, and I just keep rearranging things for hours until it starts to become three-dimensional, and it just lifts off the floor, and I suddenly see how all these pieces now fit together. And so then I number them and color code them and hook them all together, and then write an outline and then start writing the script. And so it's kind of an odd way of approaching it sometimes, but I love doing that, and I do it with lots of different pieces. I didn't so much do that with Savage, but that was a whole different process, and so that was kind of fun too. So for Savage, I was approached by Nicolette Blount, who is another local performer, writer, everything, composer. I knew her from shows that we'd done together at Jaduke, and she said, I want to write this musical, and I've never written a musical before, but I know that you've written plays. Would you want to help me out with this? And I said, sure. I said, but I don't write music. She said, no, it's just on the book. And I said, sure, I can do that. And so she had written like an outline and a couple of scenes in draft form. And so I read those, and I listened to a couple of songs that she had written, and they were really super catchy. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Yeah, let's do this. So we started working on the book about 3.5 years ago. And we've been working fairly consistently as time permits, amidst family and work and other projects and things, but fairly consistently since that time. And we're now on the fourth full rewrite draft. We've done rewrites of scenes like many times, but this is the full, complete overhaul, the fourth one that we've done. And it's kind of a different project for me because I had never written the book of a musical. And so we're working in a really different way than I'm used to. She and I Skype or Zoom for the most part, just because it fits into our, and we did this before the pandemic. We were doing Zoom writing or Skype writing years ago, but we'll actually collaborate in live time in the document. And so I can see what she's writing and she can see what I'm writing, and we'll and then we read it aloud and kind of act it out.
That's awesome.
And we're like, no, that doesn't work. Cross that out. Let's go. Or yeah, that's really fun. Let's keep that in. And so that's been our writing process, which is very different for me, but tons of fun. And she has written the music and the lyrics with some additional support from John Winolovich, who has contributed some music and lyrics here and there with some of the songs, and done a phenomenal job of arranging them. And so it's sort of like this big, huge, massive project, but we are having a blast with it. And the story is interesting because it's It's called Savage. It's about, it's based on a true story of a woman named Wanda Savage, who was a Native American sharpshooter and performer in the 1920s. And she was a circus performer and then went to vaudeville and ended up spending several years in Hollywood in silent film as a stunt woman and as a sharpshooter and as an actress to some extent, from what we can tell. And then mysteriously ended up in a brothel in Wyoming. She was married 5 times. She had, I think, 7 children that we know of. She abandoned 4 of them as she was like doing all of this performing, and eventually pulled some of them back into her fold. And the craziest part about it is that it's Nicolette's great-grandmother.
Okay. Wow.
So it's, you know,
It's personal.
it's a personal story.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've had to go beyond the facts that we know of her and, you know, adapt that for the theater. But it's still pretty true to her character and to her renegade personality. And I am fascinated with this woman. There's just like something about her that just she gets her hooks in you and you can't get away. And it's a pretty interesting story and phenomenal opportunity to make a new piece of theater. So,
and we're actually about to see something from Savage, correct?
Right. So I'm not going to set it up other than this is just a clip from a performance that was done. There's not been a complete performance yet of the whole show, but we've done snippets here and there. And so, yeah, this is a little teaser for you to see something from Savage.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Savage.
My tribe comes from. I was only 8 years old. Mama gave me a gun. She said, since your daddy left us high and dry, you're gonna have to sharpen that eagle eye. When you're in danger, there's no time to aim. Don't get a do-over in this life game. Let the ancestors guide you and hit your mark. Above all else, always guard your heart. I'm Wanda Savage, that I am, shooting from the hip, from the native land. Take no prisoners, watch the smoking gun, wander in the distance to the setting sun. Wanda Savage, Wanda Savage, Wanda Savage, Wanda Savage. She saw the birth and savage for life. Raised in the West, my soul for by strife. Survival of the fittest, day by day. Better to be the hunter than to be the prey. I lived on the streets, I've been homeless. But don't ever cross me, I'm forever with checks. Never seen a plastic cat shoot like this. My trigger happy fingers never miss. Wanda Savage, Wanda Savage, Wanda Savage.
I wish that I could see a full production of this.
Well,
So,
hopefully you will at some point.
now it was at Nymph, though,
It
correct?
was,
Before
yeah,
Nymph became defunct.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
the festival formerly known as NYMF.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, so Nicolette applied to the New York Musical Festival, and they were really enthusiastic about the project, and they said, yeah, we'd love to do this. What we can offer you right now is a slot to do a concert version of the show. All the music that you wanted, that you can fit into an hour, or maybe it was an hour and a half, I forget now. But put that together with a little bit of narration so that people have an idea of what the story is. And you'll be part of a handful. I think there were 7 shows out of a couple hundred that applied that were picked to do concert versions of their pieces. And so we took it to New York, and we had mostly New York actors and singers who performed in this festival setting, and it was amazing to hear the music come to life, because a lot of the stuff we just have like demo recordings, and some of them are Nicolette doing vocals, and some of them are John Wayne Lovitch. I'm on a couple of tracks, just so that we have it down in some form. But this was like incredible because it was live performance, and it was really amazing people. Some of them with Broadway credits, and just like totally exhilarating. And so that was a really fun way of getting our feet wet in New York. We do have a New York producer who is kind of unofficially attached to the project, but he's been with us for a couple of years now and has given us a great deal of support and feedback and guidance. And so we're continuing to work with him kind of as a consultant. And then he brought on board a New York director named Rachel Klein, who is under contract with us to direct any productions that are being done anywhere.
That's amazing.
And so she directed the Nymph concert, and anything else that comes up, she will be she'll have right of first refusal, certainly. But so that's really exciting, and obviously nothing is happening because of the pandemic. But we were supposed to have the first full production in April at Jaduke in Turners Falls, and that got shut down, obviously. So that's on hold kind of indefinitely, I guess. But we continue to work on it. We're doing, like I said, we're doing rewrites and figuring out any new material that has to go in terms of songs, and yeah, it's really fun.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see where it goes. So let's, we're going to move on. I have a question, and I think this is a great question for people who are trying to get into the business.
Sure.
What is the best advice that you can give someone who is pursuing this business?
Well, first thing I would say is, if you have a dream, pursue it. Get training wherever you can, whether it's in writing or composing or performing, singing, acting, dancing, all of that. Take classes. That also is a great way to network, to get to know people in the field. Audition for shows. Keep going, because at some point, someone's going to see you who sees something special in what you're doing and wants to work with you. And don't give up easily, because it takes time. There are very few people. I have one friend from college she graduated from college and then got cast immediately within like 2 months in the original production of Into the Woods.
Oh, wow.
I was like, well, okay, that's kind of rare.
That's luck right there.
but but the same token, it's like most of my friends have worked for years auditioning, doing workshops, doing showcases, doing small productions of things until they get in front of someone that can take them to the next level. So my advice is just keep doing it. Don't give up and enjoy it, because it should be fun.
I love that answer. It's a great answer.
Thanks.
So now I'm going to ask you a fun question, a really
Okay.
quick one. If you could have dinner with one famous person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow. There's so many. There's so many. I don't usually like to eat with dead people, so I'm going to go with a living person. Oh man. Like if I went with like, okay, the person I probably respect most as an actor who's currently working and living, I'd have to say it would be Meryl Streep. I just think she's
the best.
The best. But I also think it'd be really fun to have dinner with Amy Sedaris.
Oh my God. That would just be funny.
It would just be funny. So, either way it works. But yeah, Meryl she would be top of the list for sure.
Good choice. I'm going to ask you one more question before we finish our interview. It's the question I ask everybody at the end of every interview. What draws you to live theater, to live performance?
I love to see live performance because it's often imperfect. And that's what makes it exciting, because it's something happening right now that's rehearsed, but the minute you put it up in front of people, things change. And so it's that being in the moment when something fresh is happening is so exciting, especially when it's people who are really passionate about what they're doing. There's just nothing like it. And that's true whether it's, if I were going to see a play and Meryl Streep were in it, or I've also seen it with total unknowns, people that just have something really special going on in that moment, people I've never heard of. And it's that magic that happens kind of rarely, but when it does, it just grabs me and keeps me on the edge of my seat. And, there are times when I've seen things and they've been great performances. And then there are times when I've seen things where things went totally wrong. I was in New York seeing Medea with Fiona Shaw. Mm-hmm. This really dramatic performance. We are 10 minutes from the end of the show. She comes out with one of her dead children all bloodied in her arms. You've just heard him murdered with a chainsaw off stage. Blood's flying onto a glass wall at the back of the stage. It's like crazy. Loud, lights flashing, very modern, but like heart-stopping. And she comes out and there's dead silence in the audience. And from the balcony, you hear someone say, is there a doctor in the house? And at first, I thought it was part of the show. And then this woman keeps saying, there's a man up here who has collapsed and we need a doctor. And for a minute, nobody knew what to do. And so Fiona Shaw's just standing there, stone still with the kid, who's also total trooper, completely playing dead. And the stage manager comes out a couple seconds later and says, we're going to stop the play for a few minutes while we get help for this man. And so the play stopped at the most dramatic point.
Right.
And a few minutes later, the paramedics come in and we see this guy taken out on a gurney. And someone said, he's okay. he's breathing, he's alert, he's awake. We're just going to take him and get him checked out, and the audience applauds. And we're like, well, I guess that's the end, right? But no, they came back out and they finished the final 10 minutes of the show, and they somehow like got it back up 0 to 60.
Wow.
And gave this powerful ending. So it's like, it's stuff like that you just can't make up. And like, I'll never forget the experience of seeing that. And so that's an illustration of why I love theater, live performance.
That's an amazing answer. It is, because theater is a living, breathing thing, and every single performance is going to be different.
It's true. I like to think of theater as a living creature, if you will.
Gotcha. Well, Lindel, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Eddie.
It was so interesting to hear from a creative standpoint about building a show, about writing the book, about adapting a well-known novel / movies into something different and unique. So it was really there's a lot of information, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me come by and virtually, and I can't wait to catch up with you the next time.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Lindel.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good night. Lindel Hart, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again on K&E Theater Group's local Spotlight series. Just a reminder, if you are so inclined to help K&E Theater Group out with their 2021 season by donating, there's a PayPal link on Facebook in the comment section. If you are not on Facebook, you're on IGTV or our YouTube channel, or you would like to donate later, you can always go to ketg.org, click on Support KETG, and there is a donation button there. My name is Eddie Zitka. I'm the Artistic Director of K&E Theater Group, and I just want to thank you once again for sharing your evening with us. Have a great night.